How to reduce cortisol? Well, cortisol is a stress hormone. So in order to reduce cortisol, we have to reduce stress. And stress has been linked to every disease condition known to man. And because stress is often a result of a lifestyle, it's a way of life that we have adapted, then in order to truly reduce stress, we have to change our lifestyle. So today we're going to talk about not just what the steps are, but why they work. And once you understand that, then you can turn your lifestyle into one of stress reduction and learn how to get truly healthy. Coming right up. I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympian. And if you'd like to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss anything. Stress is an enormous topic, and cortisol is super important. And people have different reasons, but since so many people have issues with weight, they want to lose weight, and cortisol is part of that picture. That's where a lot of people start looking at cortisol. That's where we get their attention. But in order to reduce cortisol, we also have to change the whole picture. And that's kind of just a side benefit. That once you reduce cortisol and you understand the bigger picture, you don't just change one thing, you get a trickle-down effect that can be tremendously beneficial. Some people look at cortisol because of adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome. They just don't feel right. Other people look at it because it's involved with insulin resistance, weight gain, and also with type 2 diabetes. And like we looked at a recent video on Cushing's disease, which is an extreme cortisol level, it can also be involved with muscle wasting. So once we address the root, the core issues, then we turn around all of these things all at once. So what is stress? Well, stress is a response from your sympathetic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system, the part of your nervous system, of your brain, that manages everything about your body, everything that you don't have to think about, is your autonomic nervous system. It has two branches, and the sympathetic nervous system responds to things that threaten you. When there's some threat, real or imagined, the sympathetic nervous system revs you up. It increases resources so that you can defend yourself. So you increase your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body wants more blood sugar for quick fuel, so that's where cortisol comes in. Cortisol goes up to raise the blood sugar, but you also increase muscle tension, you increase LDL cholesterol, because LDL cholesterol is part of wound clotting, and during a fight-flight situation, you might get a situation where you start bleeding. So all of these things are part of the stress response, but there's a balance that we have to understand, that the parasympathetic, that's the other than sympathetic, it handles your digestion, it stimulates immune responses, it's responsible for reproduction function, and it's responsible for healing. So the key takeaway here is that you can defend yourself, you can activate the sympathetics and defend yourself, or you can activate the parasympathetics and heal, but you can't do both at the same time. You can do a little bit of one or the other, but the more you do of one, the less you do of the other. That's just how we are wired, and we're going to look at that. So even though the sympathetic is a stress response, that doesn't make it a bad thing. It's not like a mistake in the way the body is created. The sympathetic nervous system keeps you alive in emergency situations. It's just that we're not supposed to have emergency situations all the time. And it's designed for bursts of activity. So if you get chased by some wild animal, if you have an emergency, you're supposed to engage that sympathetic to a very high degree, and then you're supposed to be done with it. But in our modern lifestyle, it doesn't matter if it's a real short threat or if it's a long-term imagined threat. So financial pressures and bad news and overwhelm at work and feeling overwhelmed, insufficient, all of those are stresses. They activate your sympathetic nervous system and we develop chronic stress. So I don't have any exact numbers, but just to give you an idea, I would guess that we're designed probably for 10 or 20% burst sympathetic activity, and the rest of the time, 80-90%, we should be in parasympathetic, but with our modern lifestyle, it's kind of the other way around. We don't have many of those extreme burst activities, but we have a little bit of stress, a little bit of sympathetic activation most of the time. So it's like this balance is reversed. We've developed habits and we have become stuck in sympathetic dominance. So this is why stress is so destructive. This is why the things that the sympathetic develops, like heart rate, high blood pressure, high cortisol, muscle tension, cholesterol, that's why those are things that people take the most medication for, because your sympathetic drives those things. When they become a chronic habit, that's the stuff we end up taking drugs for. They become chronic degenerative diseases. The next thing to understand about stress is that most of the time that you have stress, you're not aware of it, because stress can be many different things. Anytime your sympathetic nervous system is activated, you have stress. It could be something chemical, it could be an infection, it could be toxicity, it could be long-term low-grade toxicity, or it could be something like food poisoning. You could have dysglycemia, unstable blood sugar, for which the body has to compensate with cortisol. That's a lot of stress. Stress can be mechanical. Being sedentary is a form of stress. Having past trauma, like slips and falls and car accidents, is a form of stress. Having a spinal stiffness, having a lack of spinal movement, also known as subluxation in chiropractic, is a form of stress. And we're going to look at that in just a second. We can also have emotional stress, and that's what people usually talk about when they mean stress. That's when you have an emotion that you don't like, when you feel bad, when you have fear, anger, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you have feelings of grief. And those are obviously types of stress, but they're not the only types of stress. They're not the only thing that activates that sympathetic, that stress response. So we want to think of this as a triangle where every part is equally important. We have chemical, we have structural, we have emotional stress. It's sort of like three legs on a table. If you have a three-legged table, you can't balance the table on two legs. You can't balance the table on one leg. You want to start addressing all sides of the triangle to create balance in your life. And now we're getting to the really cool stuff. This is what true stress management is. What is it that manages stress in your body? Well, it is your brain, and specifically it is your frontal lobe. Because stress is life-saving. Stress responses are life-saving. When something threatens you, you're supposed to react. You have to. If you don't, you're a sitting duck and whatever threatens you gets you. So stress responses are necessary and life-saving, but the frontal lobe has the ability to determine when it's time to turn it off. If the frontal lobe doesn't work so well, then stress responses just kind of come and they're acting unopposed, and they go on much stronger and much longer than they're supposed to. That's why different people have different stress tolerance. That's why they manage stress differently. Some people act very calm in stressful situations, and some people completely freak out. That's depending on how well is that frontal lobe working. And what is it that the frontal lobe does? Well, the frontal lobe inhibits. It turns things off. It's like a light bulb that the brighter it burns, the better it is at turning things off. It's like turning off the darkness, if you will. And the way that we're wired is that the frontal lobe can turn off the sympathetic stress response, And the sympathetic nervous system, in turn, is wired to turn off the parasympathetic nervous system. Why is that? Because the body has limited resources. So in a stressful situation, you're not concerned about digestion. That's a liability. You'd be wasting resources on digestion if there's something threatening you. So your body is wired that anytime that you have a threat, you turn off the parasympathetic nervous system. So even though the parasympathetics helps you digest and defend you from immune issues and it helps you reproduce and heal, it is not an asset in an emergency. The frontal lobe turns off the sympathetic stress response, so indirectly the frontal lobe turns on the parasympathetics. It turns on digestion, it turns on immune system, it turns on reproduction, it turns on healing. So by turning off the thing that was turned off, you turn it on. And this is just how we're wired. That's just part of the design. But we can use it to our advantage because if we understand this, then we can use this to control stress. So let's talk about the solutions. But we're not just going to talk about the solutions. We want to understand why they work. Because if you understand what the mechanism is, then you'll start noticing in your life when you start apply, you become more sensitive, and that's how you truly can turn it into a lifestyle, which is necessary if you want long-term results. So the way that you can manage stress is primarily through a few different mechanisms. It's by doing a pattern interrupt. So why is that important? Because the reason that you have a stress dominance is that you're stuck. It's become a habit. The brain doesn't quite know. It's done so much of it, it just gets stuck in that habit. And what we want to do is interrupt that pattern. The other way we can manage stress is through brain stimulation. Just like we talked about, if we increase the activity of the frontal lobe, then we manage stress. We can also do it with nutrients. We can give it nutrients. We can give the brain nutrients that help it function better, and we can give nutrients that are innately calming to the brain. And then we can have certain lifestyle modifications that are going to affect hormones and neurotransmitters, such as growth hormone and cortisol primarily. So let's look at the list. Number 1, aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise is fantastic because it is a pattern interrupt. It gets you away, it gets you out, it gets you moving. All of those are pattern interrupt. It's also brain stimulation because 90% of what stimulates the brain, the signals that get to the brain, 90% of those are from movement. And you're also increasing oxygenation, which your brain loves. And you're not getting tremendous amount of growth hormone from just walking, but you're getting just a little bit. You're also reducing insulin because your muscles become more insulin sensitive during aerobic exercise. So it's a fantastic way to reduce stress and reduce cortisol, of course. The next thing you can do is another type of exercise, and this might seem counterintuitive because this is kind of the opposite of aerobic exercise. This is extreme high intensity interval training, and this will stimulate cortisol, but the trick is to do it for such a short duration. You do it 15 seconds at a time. You do a few repetitions of 15 seconds until you get exhausted, until you max out your heart rate, and then you have increased your growth hormone by 300 to 400%, and growth hormone opposes cortisol. They work against each other. So you can do things to reduce cortisol, or you can do things to increase growth hormone, and you kind of accomplish the same thing. So even though you produce cortisol with HIIT, the trick is to keep the duration so short that the growth hormone benefit far outweighs the cortisol downside. If you're really, really fragile though, if you have just totally burned out your system, if you're feeling sick, you're feeling bad, you're not fit, then you might want to hold off on the HIIT, or you might want to do it extremely carefully, because this is a stress on the body and some people are just not at a point yet where intense exercise is a good idea. So if you have any question marks about that, then hold off on the HIIT. Number 3, recovery. Exercise can be beneficial, but just because it's beneficial doesn't mean that more is better. And it's the contrast between exercise and recovery that helps your body heal. So anytime that you exercise, you want to allow enough recovery, and you never want to exercise so much that your body starts feeling fatigued or worn down. Number 4, yoga. Yoga is fantastic. It is a pattern interrupt. It is brain stimulation. You stretch, you teach your brain about paying attention to different things. It's a different mindset. Highly recommended. Just don't get into the modern versions of yoga where they turn it into something intense, something upbeat, fast moving, because that defeats the purpose of reducing cortisol. Breathing exercises, number 5, very, very powerful, because your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system are tied to your breath. When you breathe in, that's a sympathetic activity. When you breathe out, it's a parasympathetic activity. So if you do a slow breath in and a slow, long breath out, then you're balancing your sympathetics and your parasympathetics. So the trick is keep your out breath about 5 seconds, or even a little bit more, but at least 5 seconds. That gives your parasympathetic nervous system 5 whole seconds to engage, and you're entraining a pattern there. Number 6, meditation. Very often tied to breathing, but meditation is more about paying attention to your mind. It's about changing your focus, which increases frontal lobe activity. So it's a pattern interrupt, it is brain stimulation, and it's about finding a profound place of peace. And in doing that, in reaching deeper and deeper levels of peace, that you're getting more and more pattern interrupts and brain stimulation. And you can start undoing, by finding that deep peace, you can start undoing past stresses also. Number 7, mindfulness. Often associated with meditation. It's even called mindfulness meditation, which it is, but mindfulness goes much, much further than that. It's something that you want to turn into a lifestyle habit. It's something that you do all day long. If you can remind yourself every minute, as you get better and better, it runs more on automatic. Remind yourself every minute to pay attention to how you feel. Make how you feel the most important thing that there is, and start looking on the bright side. That's what mindfulness really is. It's a way of life. 8, celebrate. Whenever something good happens, don't just brush it off and move on to the next thing. Take some time, pat yourself on the back, milk it. Take a minute to really sort of celebrate and appreciate and soak in why that was so good, and take a moment to just feel good about it, and now you're building momentum. Number 9, appreciate. Look around you into your wonderful life. Look at how beautiful nature is. Look at the good things in life. There is few things as powerful for feeling good and undoing stress as appreciation. You cannot appreciate and be stressed at the same time. Number 10, read. Make it a habit to read. Or if you're reading challenged, then listen to something. Get a good audio program. Most of the time you're limited to your own mind, your own thoughts. But when you read or listen to something uplifting, you have a third party put in good stuff in your mind. It's a pattern interrupt. It helps build your momentum. It helps you change perspective. It helps you build a positive outlook over time. So I can't emphasize that enough. Take 10, 20, 30 minutes every day and build yourself, grow yourself. Number 11, positive people. Notice how you feel around people and give yourself the liberty to avoid the people who make you feel bad, the people who pull you down, the people where you feel like there's a shadow coming as soon as you get in their presence. Give yourself the freedom to avoid those and instead find the people that make you feel good. Find the groups of people, the organizations where positive people hang out, and go there on purpose. Number 12, essential oils. They have become extremely popular in recent years. But how do they actually work? And the thing to understand, I'm not opposed to essential oils at all. I think they're great. But a lot of people use them as a form of nutrition, which they are not. They don't add anything that the body is missing. What they do is they provide a pattern interrupt. The smell is very, very powerful. It's the most primitive, it's the most fundamental of all human senses, and it has profound impact on the brain. So when you smell something and you pay attention to that, you're interrupting a pattern, you are stimulating the brain, and you're changing your focus. You're paying attention to something else. You're getting a timeout, and it's very, very powerful. It doesn't have to be essential oils, but anything that serves that purpose can be excellent. There are also homeopathics of flower essences. We use several in our office that have excellent effects in calming you down. You can also use herbs, number 14. There are adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha and ginseng and kava, and they help your body calm down. They have safe medicinal effects. Number 15, smile and laugh. Give yourself a moment when you're sitting in the car, just put a big silly grin on your face and smile for no reason at all. And just notice, just ask yourself, how good could I feel right now for no reason at all? Put a big smile on your face and just let that emotion ride. Just let that state go for a few seconds, and you'll have a state change. You'll have a pattern interrupt, and you'll feel better. If you do that on a regular basis, you could have long-lasting effects. You can build momentum. Allow yourself to laugh for no reason or watch a funny movie. Number 16, sleep. Sleep increases growth hormone, especially if you get a couple of hours of sleep before midnight, and you need to get enough sleep, and you need to have certain regularity to your sleeping times. That's very beneficial for your recovery and for growth hormone, which again opposes cortisol. Another way to raise growth hormone is number 17, intermittent fasting. Whenever you go a period of time without food, then you're increasing growth hormone. So if you just go from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day, you're just making more growth hormone. You are reducing cortisol. But you can't get very good results with that if you're eating a lot of carbs, because if you're creating a blood sugar roller coaster, then every time your blood sugar dips in the low end, then your body makes cortisol to compensate. So you need to be fat adapted and have stable blood sugar in order to benefit optimally from that intermittent fasting, which brings us to number 18, stable blood glucose. So that goes together with number 17. Unstable blood sugar is a stress. It stimulates cortisol whenever the blood sugar is low. Number 19, there are specific nutrients that help your brain and your adrenal glands work better. Your adrenal glands, of course, are the ones who respond to stress. Your brain detects the stress. It sends signals to the sympathetic nervous system, and it's the adrenal glands that carry out the orders of the sympathetic nervous system. So when you have a lot of stress, you're wearing your adrenals down, and you want to give them the optimal nutrition. So vitamin D3 and number 20, B vitamins, primarily B1 and B5, but don't get the synthetic stuff. You want to get it from food, and you want to get it, the best natural source that you can take sort of as an isolated source is nutritional yeast. It tastes great, I love it. You can put it in smoothies, you can sprinkle it on things. It's got kind of a cheesy flavor. Excellent source. Number 21, we are still in the nutrition category. Those are minerals. Minerals not only provide necessary nutrients for the brain, but they also have a calming effect on the brain. Magnesium especially is generally considered calming. It helps the neural membranes regulate ions better. Potassium and calcium are also very important minerals. Number 22, DHA, which is docosahexaenoic acid. Don't worry about the name. It is one of the two most important parts of fish oil. So the EPA is anti-inflammatory. The DHA is a brain-building nutrient that also has a calming effect, an anti-stress effect. Number 23, there are a couple of adrenal points that you can stimulate. You have, if you go to your belly button and you go 1 inch over on each side and 1 to 2 inches up on each side, then those are your adrenal reflex points. These are points that have been identified in applied kinesiology as early as the 1960s, and they relate to the adrenal glands. So if you take and you rub those, you put a finger on each and you rub them for a few seconds, and then you just hold them while you relax, you will notice pretty soon, 10, 20, 30 seconds, that you start getting a pulse right in the skin. And as you hold it longer, that pulse increases, and you're actually allowing the adrenal glands to calm down. So it's a direct treatment that you can do a couple of times a day. You don't have to rub very hard because they tend to get tender if you do. Number 25, you could get a pet. They are very, very calming. They have a good energy about them. Spending time with a pet, focusing on the pet, interrupts your pattern, changes your hormone balance. It really helps you reduce cortisol levels. And you could also get a hobby. You could go exercise, you could join a chess club, you could join a choir, anything that you consider fun. Anything that's your idea of fun is going to help you feel good, it's going to help your pattern interrupt, and have tremendous benefits. So even though this video is about how to reduce cortisol, it's important to understand that you never reduce one isolated thing. That cortisol is just one component of the stress response, which has a multitude of components. And once you learn how the bigger system works and you start bringing the whole system back to balance, then you will reduce cortisol. Every one of these steps will reduce cortisol, but if you understand the bigger mechanism, then you understand how you can turn this into a lifestyle. You can reduce the bigger picture of stress, and you can really start undoing imbalances and disease. If you watched a few of my videos already, then you know that we have several videos on a lot of these different topics. But if you feel that there's a topic that I haven't covered as completely as you would like, then please let me know in the comments below which one of these would be your number one choice to see more elaboration on, and whichever I see the most comments on, I'll go ahead and do a video on that. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this one. So make sure you check that out. And until next time, thanks for watching.